Okay, well, I should kick off with some disclaimers. Firstly, this slot is billed as Andy McLaughlin speaking, and I'm not Andy, I'm sorry. He is laid up ill in bed, so has delegated to me to come talk to you tonight. The second disclaimer is I have no slides, as you'll see. I'm going to resurrect the long-lost art of talking without slides. Andy, leaving things to the last minute, hadn't put together a deck, and I didn't have time this afternoon. And my last disclaimer is that although Huddle launched a Facebook application, I wasn't involved in the technical detail of that, so I am no technical expert on the Facebook platform. So while I can speak a little about the LinkedIn technology side, and there are two Huddle developers here, we've lost one in the break, can answer some questions about the technology on the LinkedIn side, I can't accurately compare that to Facebook always. So disclaimers out the way, a little bit about Huddle. We've had a live service up for just coming up 2 years. It is a network of hosted, secure online workspaces. We are aiming to do a number of things with the product. The first one is collaboration, so that is document sharing, project management, discussions, integrated into a single platform. We've got a solid and mature product there that's selling into big enterprises as well as free web users. There are a couple of other strands to the product that you'll see coming out during the course of this year. One of those is communication as part of the strategy, so that would be looking at web conferencing, phone conferencing, instant messaging. And the next strand is making your data available through a number of different channels. So linking into business social networks is a big part of that strategy. Which brings us nicely onto Huddle and LinkedIn. I'll give you a brief rundown on the story of Huddle and social networks. It starts back in January, approximately this time last year when we launched a Facebook application. It was a testing the water really to see how the Huddle functionality would play in a social network. Facebook was the big social network with an application platform, so we launched the Facebook application. Shortly after that, on Web Mission, again approximately this time last year, Andy McLaughlin got into conversation in a bar somewhere in San Francisco with some product people for LinkedIn, and over a beer said, wouldn't it be cool if we could put Huddle's collaboration functionality as part of the LinkedIn platform? That conversation went on into detailed product discussions about exactly what that would look like over a number of months, and culminated last October with Huddle being one of 6 launch partners for the LinkedIn platform, and the only non-Silicon Valley-based company. So as Andy said in his blurb for this, it was pissing with the big boys. It was Amazon, Google, Huddle. So it was a great moment for us to be up with those kind of people in the PR that came with it. Yeah, okay. So on the back of that, obviously social networks, business social networks particularly, are something we'll be looking at this year. And on the back of the LinkedIn launch, we've been approached by a number of other networks, and watch this space. We will be launching with a number of others during this year, a couple in Q1. I can't say who they are now, but think big business social networks, and you'll probably work out who they are. So that's the kind of background of Huddle on social networks. I wanted to cover a little bit of the differences between LinkedIn and Facebook, and I wanted to look at 3 things. Firstly, LinkedIn as a company to deal with versus Facebook. Secondly, interacting with our users through Facebook and LinkedIn and how that compares with our website. And secondly, a little bit on the technology side. So if I start with the companies, firstly, there's obviously a massive model difference between the two. Facebook is an open platform. Anyone can launch an application. They've actively encouraged thousands and thousands of applications on the platform. LinkedIn have taken a very different approach. It's a whitelisted platform. You have to have agreement from them for your application to be on the platform. They launched with just 6. Their approach is that whereas Facebook, in their view, has diluted the value of applications by being so many of such varying quality, they want every application on the platform to be offering significant functional value in a business environment to their users, and not to confuse them with either sheep-throwing applications or lots of applications that do very similar things. So that's the first and very big difference between the two. Following on from that, that means that we have dedicated product and technical contacts within LinkedIn who help us through integration, but also discuss how the product should look through through the process of developing it. The other big differences are we have a commercial agreement with them and a contract in place. So there is a proper formal relationship between the two companies. And the result of that is that it's in both of our interests. It's in Huddle's interest and LinkedIn's interest to produce an application on the platform that is successful and used and that has lots to take up for. So I hope that gives you an overview of the kind of very large difference between the two approaches. We've seen the business social networks definitely going the latter route, the whitelisted route. It could be because they want to, because they're a business social network and that is in some way different. It could also be just a reflection on the evolution of the Facebook platform. So it might not be that they're just business rather than social. It might be that they're newer to the space rather than established in the space. That's just down to personal opinion. So moving on for a second to customers. Again, the first thing to say is our LinkedIn application has been orders of magnitude more successful than our Facebook application in terms of user uptake. Launch day of the LinkedIn platform going live, we got more new users on the platform than the entire year to date from the Facebook application. So it's been a massive success in terms of user acquisition. Now that would be for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's a more appropriate platform for what is essentially a business tool. And secondly, there was a lot of PR around the launch, and we were one of only 6. So we got a lot more exposure than we did for our Facebook application. And that has contributed to Huddle's continued fantastic growth rate of doubling users every 4 months. So a part of keeping that pace of expansion going has been the launch on LinkedIn. So it's worth a second just to compare the LinkedIn application. So it's much more successful than Facebook for us. If you compare that with our website, so you can get the same functionality a little bit more by logging onto our website, we're a step more removed from our users. So in terms of interacting with our users, we can't direct message them in the same way. There's more restriction being part of someone else's platform about how we can interact with them. So that leads to what is the big challenge of this. And if we're honest, this is the challenge of getting this kind of thing to work, is the monetization side. So there are obviously a few very big successes on that side in the Facebook world, monetizing through an ad-based model. There are also lots of people who struggle. I mean, the majority of people on a Facebook platform struggle with an ad-funded model. That gets a step more difficult in the business, in the B2B space, effectively, because the numbers are so much smaller than a big consumer take-up Facebook application. Obviously, a big part of Huddle's revenue model is subscription-based. So there is a basic free service. Once you get used to it and you like it, you'll upgrade to get more space, more projects, more whatever. And that process is made a little bit harder by the fact you're a step further removed from your actual end user. So there's like one more click in the process before you can get through to upgrade. We would love at some point in the future for LinkedIn to have a micropayments environment in which we could upgrade people within their application, but at the moment it's several steps on to get them to upgrade. On the user side, the big success story, to contrast the struggle with getting people to upgrade, has obviously been the PR. So not only did we have really good user uptake, but the PR it generated led to a large number of inbound sales calls into our enterprise sales team from big organizations who didn't know about Huddle until we were part of a launch alongside Amazon and Google. So that's covered the contrasting dealing with the companies, the pros and cons of dealing with your users through both of those channels versus the web. Just a couple of things on the technology side. Big difference is it's open social, not FPML. That theoretically means it's portable between networks, and that's probably, if you write your application properly, 80% true. Obviously, each network will have its own particular tweaks to open social. In contrast to FBML, and I saw earlier, this is changing in the Facebook world, but you have complete control of your Canvas page within the application. You can render pretty much what you like. So, in developing applications, everyone is learning. The platform themselves are learning. The service providers are learning. There isn't a whole lot of documentation, and and everyone's kind of figuring it as they go along. That means that we were, in developing our LinkedIn application, we were somewhat developing against a moving target. They would be issuing updates to their platform to fix bugs as they went, sometimes with not much lead time before we made a change before we went live. And the LinkedIn launch itself was not without technical challenges. We spent a good chunk of time performance testing our application, making sure we had the hardware infrastructure in place so that when we opened this up at PR launch time to potentially 30 million users, we were rock solid, and we were. LinkedIn could have done with a bit of the same testing because they did have a few launch day gremlins in their system that didn't quite take the scale of users. And again, that's just an illustration of the difference in maturity levels between the two platforms at that point.